In part one, we carefully laid out the argument for the apostles' willingness to suffer and die for their faith. We examined the historical evidence, finding strong reasons to believe that at least Peter, Paul, James, the son of Zebedee, and James, the brother of Jesus, were indeed martyred. We also cited significant tradition for others like Thomas and Andrew. This sets the stage for a crucial next step. What does their ultimate sacrifice actually prove? Today, in part two, we'll dive into the profound apologetic significance of their martyrdom, addressing common objections head on. Let's tackle the biggest question that often arises when considering the apologetic value of the apostles' death. One of their most common counter-arguments is this: others have died for their beliefs, so why are the apostles any different? The question is often posed with examples like the tragic events of September 11, 2001, where radical terrorists willingly sacrificed their lives. Does that act then validate the truth of Islam? This objection is its key critical difference. Modern martyrs die for what they sincerely believe is true, but their knowledge comes secondhand from others. The terrorists in 9/11, for instance, were not eyewitnesses of any miracle by Muhammad or any events of his life. They lived over 13 centuries later. No doubt they acted out of sincere, albeit misguided belief, but their convictions were perceived at best from distant traditions and teachings. They did not know Muhammad personally, see him fulfill prophecy, because there wasn't any for him to fulfill, or witness him perform any miracles. There's a massive difference between willingly dying for religious ideas accepted from the testimony of others, like these radicals, and willingly dying for the proclamation of the faith based upon one's own eyewitness account. The deaths of those 19 terrorists provide no more evidence for the truth of Islam than, say, my death would provide for the truth of Christianity. My martyrdom would show that I really believed it, but nothing more. In stark contrast to modern martyrs, including even present-day Christians, the apostles' beliefs were not received secondhand, but from personal, undeniable experience with the risen Jesus. They proclaimed what they had seen and heard with their own eyes and ears, not stories passed down. Peter himself emphatically claimed to be an eyewitness, noting that these momentous events took place publicly, not secretly in a corner. Buddhist monks and modern terrorists are certainly willing to suffer and die for a faith they received secondhand, but the apostles were willing to suffer and die for what they had seen with their own eyes. And this is the core of the matter. If the Lord had not truly risen from the grave and appeared to his apostles, they alone would have known the falsity of his claims of the resurrection. In other words, if the resurrection did not happen, the apostles would have willingly suffered and died for something they knew was false, while people die for what they believe to be true. Even if that belief is mistaken, it is an enormous stretch to think that all the apostles were willing to suffer and die for a claim they knew was false. As Dr. Sean McDowell concludes, the suffering and deaths of the apostles testify to the sincerity of their beliefs that they had seen the risen Jesus. Their deaths underscore a profound personal conviction, not a delusion or a lie. Another significant objection comes from scholar like Candida, who argues that the lack of official records showing their apostles being explicitly offered the chance to recant their faith and live undermines the validity of their testimony. This, she claims, is the missing element required to truly make the argument truly compelling. Mars is right. We don't have explicit records of each apostle being offered a recant option or die. However, this objection overlooks the incredibly hostile and potentially lethal environment in which they ministered and their full awareness of the consequences. Consider the early chapters of Acts. We see the apostles repeatedly imprisoned, flogged, and threatened. The fact that their founding leader was a crucified claimant of the Roman Empire certainly played a part in their collective consciousness. Jesus himself explicitly warned his disciples that the world will hate and persecute them, just as it did him. Every time the apostles publicly proclaimed the name of Christ, they knowingly risked suffering and death, yet even so, they continue to teach and preach about the risen Jesus. Given their active public proclamation and their full awareness of the cost of such a proclamation. If some of the apostles died for their faith, which part 1 demonstrated they did, they absolutely qualified under the traditional definition of martyrdom. They weren't dying accidentally, they were dying because of their unwavering testimony. So, what is the ultimate takeaway from this two-part investigation into the apostles' martyrdom and their apologetic value? Let's be clear. The willingness of the apostles to suffer and die for their faith does not, in itself, prove the resurrection is true. It's one piece of a much larger cumulative case of the resurrection, which encompasses many other minds and evidence. However, their martyrdom absolutely shows the depth of the apostles' convictions. They were not liars. They did not invent the resurrection story. As the brilliant philosopher Blaise Pascal once said, I only believe history's eyewitnesses were ready to be put to death. The apostles proclaimed the risen Jesus to highly skeptical and antagonistic audience with full knowledge that they would likely suffer and die for their beliefs. All the apostles suffered and were ready to be put to death. And as we saw in part 1, we have good reason to believe that some of them actually faced execution. There is no evidence they ever wavered or recanted their core message. Crucially, their convictions were not based on second-hand testimony, but on what they saw and what they had experienced personally, transformative experiences with the risen Jesus. They truly believe he was the risen Messiah, literally banking their lives on it. It is incredibly difficult to imagine what more of a group of ancient witnesses could have done to demonstrate the great depth, sincerity, commitment to what they proclaim to be true. We hope this two-part series has provided you with a deeper understanding of this compelling argument as we continue the resurrection series. If you found this exploration valuable, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel for more historical and apologetic content, and share your thoughts in the comments below.